black thing go from left to right, and I thought, I'm going to die out here. No one's ever going to know.
And I couldn't believe what my eyeballs were showing me. I'll never forget how evil the eyes were. It was horrible. I mean, I've never seen nothing that evil.
It ran towards me at a rate that I can't even explain. Turned and stared at me, and this look of, I just want to kill you. I want to say it was human, but it wasn't.
He was yelling at me to grab a gun, grab a gun. I was like, for what? He said, just grab a gun. And there's footprints all the way to the door of my house. It had went inside my garage, all the way to the door.
911, what are you reporting?
Jesus Christ, you better...
Sir?
See ya!
Hello?
Get somebody out here.
What's going on now, sir?
That son of a bitch is about 6'9", I don't know.
Do you see him now, sir?
Yes, I'm looking right at him.
Uh-oh.
You're listening to Sasquatch Chronicles. Check us out online at SasquatchChronicles.com. If you've had an encounter, email me. My email address is wes@SasquatchChronicles.com. Welcome to the show, everyone. Thanks for being here tonight. Got a great show planned for you tonight. Going to be speaking to Chris, who's going to be sharing with us two separate encounters he had while he was out hunting. Very interesting stuff. I'll also be welcoming Paul to the show. Paul is a huge fan of the show, and he's always asking me for a shout out. And I just said, why don't you just come on, Paul, and say hi to the audience. So Paul will be on here shortly. And then Trent, who will be sharing an encounter he had while he was out with the family. And he'll be talking a little bit, too, about Skinwalker Ranch. Some strange stuff going out there, too, as well. If you've had an encounter and you'd like to be on the show, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@SasquatchChronicles.com. And if you get a chance, check out the website, SasquatchChronicles.com. Let's jump into it tonight. I want to welcome Chris to the show. Chris, thanks for coming on.
Thank you very much, Wes. It's an honor and it's a pleasure, and I thank you for hearing me out.
No, the honor's mine for having you on. I really appreciate it. And I remember I was reading through the email, and it made me, before we get into the story, as we were just talking before we went on the air, made me think of a lot of hunters I talk to that have these creepy stories, but they don't really know what it was. They don't really know what, some of the best stories come from hunters. But if you would, where did all of your encounters take place?
Tennessee, eastern Tennessee.
In Tennessee. And how long ago did your encounters happen?
These approximately about 23, 24 years ago.
Okay. Well, if you would, for the first one, maybe just kind of walk the audience into what happened. Tell us what you're out doing and just walk us into what happened.
Well, the encounter happened. A friend of mine and myself, we were bow hunting. We got a spot that we had hunted for about 15 years. It was pretty good for us to go in, kill some deer. It was an area that we called a kind of in-between spot. Deer would come through in the evenings, and it was good for us. Set them up, boom. So one day we had an idea that we would kind of play hooky from work, go during the middle of the week, something that we've never really done, but we thought, man, this is going to make it better. Deer aren't really planning on us being out there. This particular piece of property, it was private property. We were the only ones that hunted, but of course, other hunters in the area will move deer through. So we get in the woods, get hunting up in my stand. It starts getting late in the evening, and there's just no traffic. There's no deer traffic. And the time of day starts passing to where we would normally, or I would at least normally see deer by now. And it's nothing. It's just I don't know. I don't want to say it's an eerie quiet in the woods, but it's just odd. Something's different. So I go ahead and come out of my tree. I head to the truck. I'm expecting to see my friend Nathan at the truck, but he wasn't at the truck yet. So I put my gear up, and the trail that he had gone down, well, I kind of went down his trail a little bit. We had a thing that we would play practical jokes on each other from time to time. So I head down his trail just a short ways, and I step into this brush. It's a U-shaped bend in the trail, so I'm kind of hidden. I sit there for 5 to 10 minutes, and I hear him coming up the trail. And so I'm ready to play this prank on him. And his movements coming up the trail, it was a little different. It was very slow, steady, but still he was coming towards me. And I start thinking in my mind, he might be tracking a deer or something. And the last thing I want to do is jump up and scare a deer, or maybe have him, pop an arrow in me. So that's something that I definitely did not want to do. But nonetheless, he's still coming towards me. He's getting close to the bend, getting close to the brush. And when he was approximately looking through the brush, I would say probably 10, 15 feet from me, I made this grunt sound like a deer. And he stopped dead in his tracks. And it was just kind of odd because to me, it looked like he was looking right at me. It's getting dark in the woods, but I can tell that he's looking right at me. And so I just busted out laughing because, I got you. And he turns and just bolts off through the woods, through this brush. And so at first I thought, Nathan's playing a trick on me. So, I kind of come out and walk to where he stepped in the woods. And it's real thick brush. And I can hear him. He's just booking through the woods extremely fast. And I'm kind of mind blown. I'm like, God, what in the world is he doing? And at the time that I'm looking in those woods, to my left, I see something coming up the trail, and I get to looking at it, and it was actually Nathan. He comes up out of the trail, walks up to me, and says, "Hey, dude, what have you been doing?" And I said, "Man, I was just trying to play a prank on you." And he said, "Yeah, you come down there around my stand and you walked around." And I explained to him that, no, I never come near your stand. So, we had somebody else out there in this area that we privately hunted with us. And I really didn't give it that much thought, but, looking back on it, whatever it was, he didn't carry anything. He wasn't carrying a bow. He wasn't carrying a tree stand. This was empty-handed. I saw the silhouette, I would say 5 to 6 feet tall, very broad-shouldered. I do remember that. And, thinking, this is Nathan. Where's his gear? Where's his bow? Where's his tree stand? All of it, when you start thinking back and recounting the situation, it didn't really make sense. There shouldn't have been anybody else there. But the brush that he went through was, it's extremely thick. It's thorns, it's stickers, it's honeysuckle vines. No way that it was a person. I would say, without a doubt, no way a person.
That's a creepy one, too. Plus, too, if it would have been a person, you think they would have said something when you were grunting, or they would have said something to Nathan, too. It's not normal to... Did Nathan ever directly communicate or try and yell at the person thinking it was you?
No. What he told me was he thought it was me, and maybe I would spook a deer out, but then I never came around to him, so he finally came out of the tree. Whatever it was that came up that trail came from his direction where he was at. And like I said, we hunted this property 15 years. Nobody ever else on that property but us.
And the brush it made an exit through? What was it about the brush that made you think there's no way a guy could have gone through this?
As thick as it was. I don't know if you've ever seen deer just bolt through some of the thickest brush that you've ever seen. I've seen deer do it a lot, and you try to go through there, and it's like, no way. you back up. You give up on getting the deer. It's like, the heck with that. This stuff was thick. I mean, briars, honeysuckles, branches. And if there was an area that you would, if I wanted to lose somebody, that's where I would go. But just off the top of my head, there's no way I would step off into that.
Yeah, and it's interesting, too. You said it was private land?
Yes, private property.
And what did you guys think at the time? I know looking back is always 2020, but at the time, did you just think someone was messing with you guys out there?
Not a whole lot was said that day. Later on, which I never saw anything else out there. My dad hunted the property, and another friend of ours hunted the property. And from time to time, they would see something, and they would make jokes that it's Chris's dude running through the woods up there. Or we saw Chris's dude running through the woods. But it would just, nobody would ever get a clear sight of something. Never did talk to anybody else while we was on that property. But, I mean, it did become like a running joke. It was Chris's dudes up there running around. We didn't get any deer.
No, I hear you. And that's usually the way it goes with hunters, doesn't it?
It is.
Usually that's just the way, you got to be accustomed to that because that's the way it's going to go. But that's interesting. That's really interesting. You think if it would have been a person, which it doesn't sound like, but if it would have been a person, they would have said something, or they would have, especially with you grunting, and not ran off into the brush, they would have just kept running down a trail. That's human behavior. Just keep going down the trail. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Yeah. And I understand that, even with a grunt, why would you turn and run the other direction? And what's weird, I mean, thinking back on it, I was hidden in the brush. When I grunted, whatever it was, singled me out, looked right at me. And before, I never gave it much thought, but, after thought, holy cow, that's pretty good. It looked right at me. I'm sitting in full camouflage, and it singled out and looked directly at me before it ran.
And how many years later was your second encounter?
Second encounter, probably about 3 years.
And Chris,
different location, though.
Oh, different location. Yeah, that's what I was going to ask. If you would kind of start from the beginning, tell us what you were doing. Were you hunting again?
I was hunting. I had gotten picked for a draw hunt in a state park. I don't know if you want me to mention the name.
Oh, that's up to you. It's completely fine if you want to.
It's Fall Creek Falls State Park. There was a draw hunt. It was bow season. The bow draw hunt. I got picked. You got an area that you could hunt. I went up a couple of weeks before, kind of scouted the area to find me an area to set up, found a good game trail, and picked my tree out. The day of the hunt, I go into this area, go in to set my tree, stand up, get ready to do my hunt. I got there well before daylight because when daylight broke, I wanted to be ready to hunt. The area that I was hunting, probably about a quarter of a mile from my truck where I parked, on the main road going in. So I get in, start setting up my tree stand, start heading up the tree. I don't know exactly how high I was up. I was up off the ground a little ways, and I started hearing this sound in the woods. And it, to me at the time, it sounded like mumbo jumbo, but it did sound like the samurai movies. And I could tell that it sounded like two men in the woods making this sound. And this is in an area where I'm the only one that's supposed to be hunting this area. I was drawn to hunt this. Nobody else is supposed to be there. So I'm hearing this sound, and so I turned around in my tree stand, trying to get an idea of the location where it's coming from. And my seat on the tree stand, it clanged pretty loud on the metal. And while turning, it made that sound, and all sound in the woods, they stopped. Everything stopped. And I waited for, to me, what seemed like it was an eternity, and nothing, couldn't hear anything. So I'm thinking, holy cow, this is kind of freaking me out hearing this sound. Maybe it's somebody coming in. They're hunting this area too. I really don't know. So, I kind of start a little bit of yelling, hollering, hey, I'm up here hunting. No sound. So I just kind of sat real quietly for a few minutes, and I start hearing them come down the trail that I was on. This was a game trail coming off of another main trail. And I can tell that it's two people coming down this trail, the game trail. They're walking a little bit in the leaves. They're walking on the trail, and they're kind of coming right to me towards my area. So I turned on my flashlight, kind of moved it around a little bit, and I called out. Once again, it got quiet. They stopped. Everything stopped. So sat for a few minutes more. I'm thinking, God, it's kind of starting to make me mad. I'm wanting to hunt this area. This is a once-in-a-lifetime chance for me to bag a good-sized deer in a state park that nobody's really hunted before. And here I got somebody walking in on me. So shine the light, nothing. I wait, nothing. Called out, nothing. So once again, it got real quiet. Heard them step off the main trail. They're coming through the woods, and they split up. There was one on the left side of the trail. There was one on the right side. And so at this time, I'm like, you know what? The heck with that. I want to come down and talk to these guys. So I called out again, and once again, it stopped. They stopped. So I turned back around, and I said, heck with it. I'm coming down the tree. So I start coming down the tree, which while I come down the tree, my back was to them. My face is towards the tree. And I could hear the one that was on my left now coming towards me. I mean, he's getting close. And I had every thought that whenever I got to the ground, I was going to be confronting the person face to face. I could hear this person walking up on me. The one off to my right, I could hear that he was going through the woods in the direction of the main trail. So didn't worry about him, but I thought, you know what? I'm going to confront him, and we'll figure this out. I'll get to hunt. They'll get to hunt. Everything will be okay. So I get to the ground, turn around with my flashlight, and there's nothing. I can't see anybody. There's no sound. It's just really quiet. I'm there on the ground. And so it's kind of making me mad. I start breaking down my tree stand, get my gear. I done made up my mind I'm going to go to the truck. So as I'm breaking my tree stand down, I just kind of yell out to them, hey, I'm going to go to the ranger station, and we'll figure this out. If you're supposed to be hunting here, you hunt here. If I'm supposed to be hunting here, I'll be back and I'll hunt here. So gather my stuff up, head up to the trail, and I could hear that. I could hear them. It was off the trail just a little bit. As I get to the trail, I could have sworn I heard one of them. There's mumbling. Something was being said. I couldn't quite understand it. And so that's when I turned around and I started yelling. I started cussing them and told them, I know for a fact I'm supposed to hunt this area, but we'll get this situated with the ranger. Turn back around, start to head towards the truck. And that's when they threw a rock at me. And this was a pretty good sized rock. It didn't hit me, but it landed close to me. And I thought, man, this is, it's really got me ticked off. It's really got me mad, wanting to hunt. And I got somebody out here in my area. I got somebody here throwing rocks at me. So I turn back around, start heading out again. And once again, they start throwing rocks and these sticks at me. And so I turn back around, slam my stuff on the ground, exchange a couple of more words with them, yelling at them, and gathered my stuff up, and I start walking out. And I can hear them coming up behind me. I would occasionally just kind of glance around to look. They weren't close enough where I could see them, and it wasn't daylight enough where I could see real good. But they were steadily right behind me, kind of pushing me out of the woods. So I get to the truck, load my gear up, and I'm mad. I'm furious. And so, yeah, I act like a little kid. I spin around on the road. I throw gravels all over the place. I started honking my horn, flashing my lights, and then I start to take off down the road. And one of them threw a large rock, and he hit the back of my truck. I didn't stop. I thought, you know what, if you want to get throwing rocks and stuff, we'll go talk to the Rangers, which I did. I went to the Rangers, told them somebody was in there hunting my area or in my area. They assigned me a different area. And kind of, you know, everything went on for 20-something years. I don't think anything about this. And while I'm at work, I start listening to your show. And lo and behold, one day, there's this samurai sound that comes out. And I kid you not, Wes, the hairs stood up on the back of my neck. And everything from those two incidents, which they were years apart, came right back to me. And heck, I was scared.
Yeah, I don't blame you. I wanted to ask you, let me pull it up here real quick. I wanted to see if this is what you heard.
Right there, I just see movement right through there.
And was that similar to what you heard?
It is very similar. Yeah.
That's enough to terrify you. I know that's the Sierra sounds from Ron Moorhead. And I had to talk to another hunter here in Washington State, and he was telling me about this encounter. It's very similar to yours. He was actually walked out of this area, and he thought hunters were screwing with him. And he goes, Wes, it was like a bad samurai movie. And I go, what do you mean by that? He goes, I don't know what language these guys were speaking. He goes, I don't even know if it was a Sasquatch, but it was like, and then I played that clip for him, and he's like, that's exactly what I heard. And he had the similar thing happen where they threw a rock. I would imagine at the time you were just kind of pissed off that these guys were throwing rocks at your truck and messing with you at the time, not really thinking it was Sasquatch.
Exactly. And like I said, you know, I think I got over it. Whatever. Those guys, they got one over on me. That's fine. 20-something years later, I'm hearing this sound and start putting, you know, two and two together, and it is completely terrifying. I don't know. Was I in a confrontation with two of these things? Yeah, was I being an idiot and, you know, trying to, I don't know, stare them down, yell them down, thinking it was somebody trying to hunt my area? That kind of disturbs me. It kind of makes me nervous.
Yeah, I bet. I wonder why the Rangers didn't go back up there and say, hey, there's no one in that area. It's okay to go back there.
I don't know, which I do remember, but when I got to the ranger station, I was pretty furious. And I remember the one ranger told me, he said, hey, there's other areas we can put you in, don't worry. And I did end up getting a deer from that hunt. And, you know, at the time, that was the biggest thing I was concerned about. Hey, I got to get a deer. Not really putting my own safety out there. I was getting a deer out there is my most important thing to do, which is extremely foolish. Looking back on it, I wouldn't do that again. I wouldn't.
Yeah, well, if you don't think Bigfoot exists or Sasquatch doesn't exist, I could see how you'd just be kind of irritated that someone's kind of... Did they walk you all the way back to the truck?
They did, yeah. Yeah, it was... I could tell they was following me all the way out. They were behind me. I could tell it was two of them. I could hear them moving around. I knew that it was two of them. When they first started, it's like they come down the trail talking to one another until I moved around. It was definitely two of them that was communicating. Whenever I got back out on the trail, the one that made a mumbling sound, I mean, I hate to say it, but, you know, it wasn't, but it was kind of like somebody saying, you know, jackass. but it wasn't. It's not what they said. But to me, my interpretation of it was challenging me and saying something to me, and I didn't understand what they said, and that's why I flipped out and went off like I did.
Yeah, and sometimes even when you hear like a foreign language, the brain will play a trick on you to where you think you know what they're saying, or you pick up words, little tiny words, even though that's not really. Even in the Ron Moorhead thing, there's a guy who posted a video clip, and he claims to show all the words that it's saying, and I'm sure they weren't saying those words, but if you read what he puts up there and you listen to it, you're like, oh, that's what it sounds like. So I could see you being upset over them saying that to you.
Also, their tone, to me, that let me know that it was two guys, or it was male. It definitely wasn't, like I don't know. It wasn't a man and a woman out there. The tone of the voice, it was deep. It was a deep tone. Yeah, I do remember that.
I wanted to ask you, from when you were in the tree stand and you heard them chattering, did you notice? When I say tone, a little bit different. Did you notice the tone change from when you were leaving and them throwing rocks at you? Was it more of an aggressive tone, or was it the same as before when they were talking back and forth?
It was definitely more aggressive whenever the one mumbled something. It was extremely deeper. And that's why it made me think, it was somebody either taunting me or making fun of me, or, it's like the bully getting his way and the other person walking away. That's what it put me in the mind of.
Yeah. Did you ever go back to that area?
The Fall Creek Falls area? No. As a matter of fact, I have not been back in that area since that incident. And it wasn't because of that incident. It was a draw hunt. So I really didn't have any reason to go back up in there.
What was it about, what got you interested in Sasquatch? Was it thinking about these encounters over the years, or?
Actually, whenever I was young, my uncle took me to a drive-through movie. And there was a movie in the 70s that came out. I can't remember I think it was Sasquatch was the name of it. But like I said, that was something that lived in the Pacific Northwest. It was not something that lived here in Tennessee. So there was no reason to think about something like that. The areas that I hunted, and I still hunt today, some of them around the first encounter, which was around Flat Top Mountain, not far from Chattanooga, not a whole lot of threat of seeing a bear, so you don't really worry about that. The other area up towards Fall Creek Falls, you might see a bear up there. You might see a boar up there. So your idea of thinking of something to worry about changes with the area that you're in. I never would have thought anything like that around the Flat Top area for sure. As far as a bear and the Fall Creek Falls area, that wasn't a bear talking to me.
No, it definitely doesn't sound like it. And like I said, I do get a lot of reports, especially from hunters early in the morning. They'll report hearing that weird vocalization, and the Sierra sounds are perfect for it, because a lot of times when I play it for hunters, I either get one of two reactions. Either they'll say, no, it was faster than that. The chatter was a lot quicker, or they'll say that was very close to what I heard. And I know Ron Moorhead has another vocalization that sounds more monkey-like, and it's a lot faster than the samurai chatter. But like I said, one guy here in Washington State, he was like, it was like a bad samurai movie, man. He's like, I don't know what it was, but these guys, in the moment I played that for him, he was like, that was it. That's exactly what I heard.
Something else I would like to share with you. I know we had talked a little bit before, and I told you about gold panning and stuff around the Coker Creek area. Just spoke briefly about that. I talked to a friend of mine, and while we was talking, of course, the subject comes up, and so we're, kind of chit-chatting, and he starts telling me the story about how he's gold panning, and he's with another guy, and while they're gold panning, these two bears actually come up on them, and the older guy that was with him reaches over and he smacked this bear on the nose, and it freaked my friend out. He's like, "Holy cow, I cannot believe this just happened." And the bears walked on, and he said, "Sometimes you just got to show them." And he's like, "God, I would never in my life imagine doing that." And like a couple hours later, they're still in the creek, they're still panning. And he told me, he said, "Chris, we heard a knock." And at the time he told me, he said, "These Bigfoot shows, you hear them do a tree knock." And I said, "Yeah." He said, "While we're there panning, and I'm panning with this guy that just smacked a black bear in the nose and made it leave," he said, "we heard a knock sound on a tree. And the guy immediately turned to me and said, 'Let's get our gear and let's go ahead and get out of here.'" And he said the look on his face was, now, we should have already been at the truck. And I just wanted to mention that to you, that he, the guy never would speak anything of it. He said, "What do you mean? What was that? What was that?" And he said, "It's just time for us to leave. We need to leave right now." And he said that always kind of blew his mind. Here's a guy that smacks bears in the nose, but he can hear a knock sound in the woods, and he's ready to get out of there before he's seen anything else. And so that's just something I did want to share with you.
No, I appreciate sharing. Makes you wonder what that guy saw or what he's experienced in the past to make him get up and leave. To smack a bear in the face, that's pretty ballsy. But to hear a knock and then pack up and say, "Let's go," makes you wonder what he's experienced to where he knew what that was.
I have to agree. And some of the things that kind of, I don't know, that it doesn't really keep you safe, but sometimes not knowing is better than knowing.
It's true. I have to agree with you on that. Sometimes not knowing is a lot better. Ignorance is bliss. I know it's a dumb quote, but it's so true. Well, Chris, I appreciate you coming on and sharing the encounter. I enjoyed hearing it. Again, sometimes you get with these things, they're aggressive, and then sometimes they'll up and leave. But people who have this, it's kind of like when I had Tim on the last show. We were talking about the history of the wild man. And I kind of wanted to show the audience there's a history of aggression here. This isn't just a Wes Germer coming up with his own theories and only presenting one side of the story here. There's a long history of aggression here, but, not always. Sometimes they will get up and they'll leave. But if they don't, you're in trouble. Your encounter could have turned into like Mike Woolley's encounter. I don't know if you've ever heard Mike tell his story about when he was out and two of these things approached him. But they can go aggressive on you real quick. And if they're going to walk you out and you're cussing and yelling and they're still following you and tossing rocks at you, and then you're driving off in your truck and they're hitting the truck with a rock on your way out, that's probably best to leave at that point. Because if you're still there, they're probably going to teach you a real lesson besides throwing a rock at you. You know what I mean?
Exactly. I kind of look at it as that was my warning. Now looking back on it, that was my warning. You need to get on out of here. You don't belong here, and we're going to show you that you don't belong here. Growing up, we would hear stories of the wild man. We would hear stories of even in Chattanooga, a lizard man. But all these stories, if you just take the lizard man and if you take the wild man out of it and you put Bigfoot into it, it's all the same information being passed along. Just it's being called something different, so it's looked at totally different. It's thought of totally different.
Yeah, it's true. It's definitely true. And, like I said, a lot of these stories, even down south where you're at, or even further down south, you get more of Texas, Oklahoma, Arkansas, you get more in those areas. And, you can replace Chicken Man or Corn Man or whatever the locals call it. And you're basically talking about the same creature. They just have a different name for it.
It's true. Wes, I want to say thank you. I have not talked a lot about this with people. Sometimes, you don't know if you want to talk about this. You don't know if you want to say something. Very few people that I've talked to. I've talked to my priest. I got a friend of mine, is Matt Sieber. He's with the East Tennessee Bigfoot, and you. And now I guess your audience, but that's all that I've shared it with. But there is kind of a therapeutic release, I guess, speaking of it, and I want to thank you for that.
Well, no, I thank you for coming on, and it's nice to kind of get things off your chest, and I'm just glad that you made it out okay, that there wasn't any serious altercation. You know, you can always replace a dent in a truck, but if they get a hold of you, there's things you can't replace. But I'm just glad you made it out okay, and I really thank you for coming on the show and sharing it with the audience and with me. I really do appreciate it.
Well, thank you very much.
And next up on the show, I want to welcome Paul. And this is a kid from Ohio. Nice kid. He says hi to me every day on Facebook. And, you know, I get a million messages every day. And Paul just sends me a simple hi, asks me how I'm doing. And I know he's a big fan of the show. He's been asking me for months to give him a shout out on the show. And I thought, you know what, I'll just bring him on, let him say hi to the audience. It's a lot better than shout outs. I don't do a lot of shout outs. But I thought, hey, I'll just bring him on and let him say hi real quick. Paul, welcome to the show. Thanks so much for coming on. How you doing, bud?
I'm doing good.
Good. I know I get a hi from you every day on Facebook. Thought I'd throw you on the show. I know you're a big fan of the show and you listen to it. And what got you interested in Sasquatch, Paul?
I think the first time was seeing it on like Destination America. Destination Truth.
Oh, okay.
Josh Gates.
I gotcha. And so you've been interested ever since?
Yep. And I've been going out hiking and such. Had a few things, but I'm not 100% for sure, but it kind of creeped us out and such in the woods. No.
You had a growl, you and your friends?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty scary, isn't it?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, hearing one of these things growl will definitely freak you out. You listen on iTunes or?
Yeah, I've been listening since you guys started the show.
Oh, cool. Well, I appreciate that very much. Very much. I know you wanted me to give you a shout out, and I figured I'll just bring you on. That way you can say hi to the audience.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome, Paul. And thank you for taking the time to listen to the show. I really appreciate it.
And I have gotten 4 of my friends into your show since I've been listening to it.
Oh, I appreciate that, man. I appreciate that. What's your favorite episode?
Probably the Chewbacca man.
That's one of my favorites, too. That was a creepy one, wasn't it?
Yes, sir.
You going to be heading out to the Ohio Bigfoot Conference?
Yep.
Oh, nice.
I believe it's like 9 days now.
Yeah. Did you go last year?
Yes, sir.
Nice. What do you think of that? I've never been to the Ohio Bigfoot Conference. What's your favorite part of it?
Like going there, meeting everybody, listening to all the stories, getting to just meet everybody new, and learn from people, because I'm all about learning.
Yeah, aren't we all? Aren't we all?
Yes, sir.
Well, you have to give me an update when you go to the conference. You have to come back on the show and give the audience an update on what happened out there, would you?
Yes, sir. Hey, quick question. Did you get a chance to take a look at those pictures I put on Facebook of the footprints?
I didn't. I'll have to go take a look at them. Are they on your Facebook?
Yes, sir. You would have to let me know what you think of them if you get a chance. We were out in a place called Coshocton, Ohio, down by Woodbury, Ohio, in Woodbury area, a place where Doug Waller had his sighting back in the day.
Oh, okay.
If you know Doug.
Yeah, I'll have to check those out. I'll definitely have to check those out. And they're on your Facebook and your photos?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, I'll definitely check that out, Paul. Well, I appreciate you coming on, man, and just saying hi to the audience. And thanks for the hi every day on Facebook I get from you. It's probably the nicer comments I get. Usually I get kind of ugly comments. So, hey, I'll take a hi any day. And I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much for listening and, getting your friends to listen to the show, too, as well. I really appreciate it.
Like I said, I enjoy your show. And everyone I tell about it, they enjoy it, too.
I appreciate it. Thank you, Paul.
Alrighty.
And there goes Paul K from Facebook. Thanks again, Paul, for coming on the show. And I'll have to have you back, Paul. Definitely take some notes when you're out there at the Ohio Bigfoot Conference. I'll have you back on the show, and you can give the audience the update for all of us who can't make it to the Ohio Bigfoot Conference. And next up, I want to welcome Trent to the show. Trent, thanks for coming on.
Hey, you're welcome, Wes. Glad to be here.
No, I'm glad to have you on. And where did your encounter take place?
So here in Utah, there's the city of Logan, which is pretty up north in Utah. And a bit east to there's an area called Monte Cristo. And we were up in that area.
Oh, I gotcha. Okay. Well, if you would, for the audience, let's kind of start from the beginning. Tell us what you're out doing and just walk us into what happened.
Yeah. So me and my father, we're pretty into the topic of Bigfoot and Sasquatch. And, you know, we've been kind of looking into it for a while. And we decided, hey, you know what, let's just go out and try to find one. We weren't going out and being serious about it. We decided to bring my stepmom and my sister-in-law and my brother along, just kind of like a family thing. Not really serious, just kind of, you know, hey, let's go look for Bigfoot. It'll be fun. And so we left from about Ogden, and it took about 2 hours to get to where we were going. And along the way, probably about 30 minutes from where we finally ended up, we saw a big bull moose out in the field, and we were kind of fascinated by that. And then a little further up the road, there was a female moose with a young calf, and she was actually trying to get the calf to leave her, kind of like, you know, they do to go out on their own. And we thought that was pretty cool. And we were just kind of like, wow, we've already seen, you know, some wildlife, you know, who knows what we're going to see out here. And that got us kind of in the mood, and we were pretty excited. And it was about, you know, twilight when we finally got to where we were going, because we wanted it to be nice and dark. And we ended up on a dirt road, and we were at the very head of the dirt road. And we got out of the car, and we had we were getting our gear ready. We had flashlights, and my brother had a 40 caliber gun. My father had a 9mm, and he gave me a little 22 to protect myself. But I'm like, well, if I'm going to see anything, it's just going to tickle it. You know, it's not going to do anything. And they go, you know, we're here. You'll be all right. I was about 17 at the time when this happened. And so we all get our flashlights, and we start walking down the trail. And the trail was like, so you're going down a dirt road, and to your left, there's a hill coming down, and it's really thick with trees and bushes. You can't really see up into it, but there's a hill coming down, and then it flattens down to the road. And it's a decent-sized dirt road. You know, you can get like 2 cars on it. And then at the right, the hill starts going back down into another forest area. And so we're walking, and it's pretty dark. I think there was a bit of a quarter moon out, not very bright. You could just kind of see the shapes of the trees, but, you know, that's about it. And about 3/4 of a mile up the road, we're all looking around with our flashlights, having a good time, teasing and joking each other. And everyone's looking down the hill, because I figured they thought if they saw anything, it would be down the hill. I don't know where that would come from, but that's just everyone's thought. And we're all looking down the hill, and all of a sudden I got this really bad feeling. It was a horrible feeling of dread and fear. And something just told me that I need to point my flashlight up into the hill area where all the trees and the bushes are. And so I point my flashlight, and I immediately land on 2 very, very big eyes. And they were about 15 feet away from me. It was kind of behind a bush and next to a tree. And the eyes, if you were to take your index finger and your thumb and make a circle with them, they were roughly around that size. They were pretty big, and they were spaced pretty far apart from each other. I had no idea what I was looking at. And my brother was next to me, and he's about 8 years older than me. And growing up, like if, you know, kids were ever picking on me or anything, I could always, you know, call for my older brother, and he'd come beat them up. He was always like the big macho guy. So I always look up to my brother for, you know, in situations when I'm afraid, because usually he's not afraid of a lot of things. And, you know, I nudged him in the arm, and I'm like, hey, look, you know. And he points his flashlight over, and he goes, oh, no. Like, what do you mean, oh, no? So as soon as I could tell he was scared, that's when all the fear really hit me. That there's something sitting there watching us, and my brother's afraid, and now I am absolutely petrified. Like I couldn't move. I couldn't do anything but just stare back at him. And, my heart was beating so hard I could hear it in my ears, and I had no idea what to do. And everyone's sitting there like, what are you guys seeing? What are you guys seeing? And we kept trying to tell them there's some eyes. And they're like, where? And during this time, the eyes really never moved. But about 8 seconds into it, they blinked. And it wasn't a very quick blink like you would normally see. It was very slow, almost like a deliberate blink. Like at the rate of blink, you could easily tell the eyelids were going over the eyes and then back up. And that absolutely was the worst thing in the world because, that made sure knowing that there's a living thing out there looking at me. And I had no idea what to do. And just about 10 seconds into it, the eyes move. I think either whatever it was turned its head or moved its body away from us because the eyes were gone. And we're like, oh, no, where to go? And it let out a really aggressive huff, like a, really, really powerful huff. And at the time, only me and my brother saw the eyes, but everyone heard the hoof. And when it did that, my brother pulled out his gun, so I pulled out mine, and my dad's in the back behind my stepmom and my sister-in-law. And we're like, Dad, get up here. He's like, no, I heard that. I'm not going up there. I'm like, Dad, get up here. So he was being like really afraid, which didn't help, my situation because now my dad's scared out of his mind. I don't know what I'm going to do. And we're pretty much with the flashlights looking to see if we could find out where it was. I didn't hear much movement though. After it turned the eyes away from us, we didn't hear much movement. We only heard the huff. And someone just started saying, shoot. And my quick response was just to pull the gun in front of me about 5 feet in front of me, and I just shot 2 bullets onto the ground. And then we all started running. And we pretty much ran all the way back to the car. We were all winded. And the whole time I was just so afraid that there was something behind us. I never bothered to look. But we made it back to the car and nothing had followed us or anything. And we're all sitting there trying to collect ourselves of what just happened. And really soon after we got to the car, the forest ranger pulls up and he gets down and he says, hey, well, I heard some gunshots off in this area and it's actually a bow season for deer. So I got to come check that out because, making sure no one's hunting deer with guns. It's bow season. And we're like, yeah, no, sorry. We saw something off in the woods and it really scared us. So we kind of shot at it. And he was like, well, what? And I kind of told him what I saw because only me and my brother saw what it was. And he was like, oh, wow, yeah, that's pretty scary, But and he says, to be real with you guys, there are things out here, whether dangerous, and you need to be careful out in the woods, especially at night. And we were just kind of like taken back by that because we thought he would have just said, oh, it's a deer, or it was just, something else. But he was telling us that there's things out here. And my dad went off to talk to him. I don't know really what they talked about. I just sat in the car and I was still in shock. I couldn't really function.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. Did he allude to anything else?
Kind of. He was just, he brought that up when we told him that we were out looking for Bigfoot, kind of. We were just kind of like, hey, we're out there looking for Bigfoot and whatnot. And he said, well, there are things out here. And the way he said it, it seemed like he was trying to indirectly tell us that, yeah, maybe they're out here, just telling us to be careful because, if anything, he would have said, well, they're not out here. So, whatever. But he just told us, you need to be careful out here because there's really dangerous things out here. He would have said maybe bears or wolves or anything. There's no wolves up here, but, I think he would have been more specific if he wasn't alluding to something,
Yeah, no, I hear you. And it's like what you and I were talking about before we went on air, where I was telling you about the guy that was hiking and he got rushed out of an area and whatever it was obviously a Sasquatch, but it was throwing rocks at this guy and it was just being aggressive. It was knocking things down and basically pacing this guy out. And this happened here in Washington State. And the guy ran into a ranger and he told him what happened. And he's like, I think there's kids up there. I think there's because he didn't believe in Bigfoot. He's like, I don't know if it's a poacher up there, but someone's up there screwing around. And if I would have had a gun, I would have shot. And the state ranger came out and told him that there's Bigfoot in the area. Then he just kind of laughed at the guy. And when I was talking to him, he said, what was interesting is the guy didn't flinch one bit. It wasn't a punchline of a joke. That really threw the guy off because he was like, this guy's serious. I wanted to ask you, how far away from you was the eye shine?
I would say no more than 15 feet. It was really close because the way we were standing, I was closer to the left side where the eyes were, and everyone else was kind of off to the right. So I was probably about 15 feet away from him.
And how big were the eyes?
The way I would describe it is, you take your index finger and your thumb, and you make a circle kind of like you're doing the OK sign, and you get that circle in between your thumb and your index finger. They were about that big, but probably a little bit bigger. And they were at least 3, 4, or 5 inches apart from each other. It was, whatever it was, I could tell it was massive. Because if it was a deer or a raccoon or something, the eyes would have been real small and real close together, and I wouldn't have been so startled. But the fact that they were huge and far apart, I mean, and let's see, the bush was probably about 3 feet high, and it was peeking over the bush next to a tree.
I wanted to ask you too, what color were the eyes?
If I were to give a description of that, I'd say they had an amber glow to them, but really bright. Like it wasn't a deep amber, it was more of like an amber highlight. Just real bright though.
Yeah, no, I understand. And, when you see something like that, I mean, most wild animals, generally speaking, will leave, especially if there's a group of people.
Exactly.
Even one person, they'll generally leave. I've never had a wild animal stick around. Anytime I've ever been out, they just don't. They will leave. Even if it's a cat, generally speaking, 99% of the time they will leave, especially if there's a group of people, they will leave. If you're by yourself, you might.
Close as they were.
Yeah, they're just not going to stick around that close. And the vocalization that you heard, that huff, you hear a lot of people say that, as far as Sasquatch doing that huff. And it makes you wonder what else could it have been.
Exactly. And I went and read a book about bears, and it was talking about like bear behavior and everything. And because I originally thought it was a bear, that's what I went and told everyone at school and in the family, that it was a bear. But the more I look into bears and learn more about Sasquatch, it wouldn't fit the description of a bear or any other animal. Yeah, because, I was within 15 feet of it, a group of us, and it didn't leave. It gave us a good look before it left.
Yeah, in the region where you're at, I think the only thing out there really is black bear. And I don't know how much black bear you have out there, but black bears are skittish. I get a lot of crap for saying that, but black bears are skittish as hell, man. I've seen it several times when I was hunting way before my Bigfoot life, and they are skittish. They will not stick around. They're not the curious bears people think they are. If you're in the area and they catch wind of you or within 15 feet, if that would have been a bear and it was within 15 feet and it didn't bolt the moment you guys stumbled upon it, you're in for trouble. Cause that bear's probably going to attack. But the fact that it just kind of blinked and sat there and watched you, that's not bear behavior.
Exactly. And we were being decently loud enough that any wildlife would have heard us coming. We were chatting and teasing each other about being scared and, just joking around. I mean, the situation went from just real kind of fun and happy to just real serious real quick with the eyes.
Yeah, I bet. Did you ever talk to your dad about the private conversation he had with the ranger?
Well, I brought it up to him the other day, and he told me something. He said something along the lines that he had the ranger when he was going to college. He was actually able to go have dinner with, I forget the name, I'd have to ask him, but he had dinner with a well-known Bigfoot researcher.
Oh, the ranger did?
Yeah, that's something that they're talking about, because I'm sure my dad wanted to ask about, cover-ups or whatever, or if he's seen anything. I'm sure. I mean, if I was more collected, I would have loved to have been a part of that, but I had to sit down and process everything because I couldn't believe it.
Yeah, I bet. Do you guys ever go back to the area?
We haven't, but I really want to. I've been going out on a lot of drives up into the mountains because this summer I kind of want to get back out there and look,
I wanted to ask you, after you fired off the gun, did you guys hear it anymore, or was it just turn and fire off 2 shots and turn and run?
It was pretty much right after I shot it, broke all the tension, and we started running, because at that moment it was either, run or stay and find out what it was, and I don't think any of us really wanted to know. It was more of just, maybe the shots were scared away while we run. I think that's kind of what they wanted me to do. I don't know why they had me do it, to tell you the truth, but they just said, Trent, shoot, 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 I'm like, okay. So I shot the ground and we ran. And, ever since then, I've been absolutely terrified of eyeshine. Eyeshine is one of my biggest fears now, because it takes me right back to that,
Yeah, well, like I said, just be careful when you're out there. Not every encounter is going to be aggressive. I'm sure you guys have heard the show. I mean, not every encounter is aggressive. There is more mild encounters that people run into, and a lot of times the creature will just get up and walk off. Sometimes they don't, though, and those are the ones you have to be worried about when they, I'm not so sure that gunfire it scares these things off. It probably just stayed there and watched you guys run off. Because I think a lot of times with gunfire, and again, this is just my own personal theory, I think they've seen it time and time again. Guys go out, shoot deer, guys go out. And so I don't know that they're really startled by gunfire.
Oh, without a doubt. And especially a group of, us, and it being that close, I definitely think whatever it was wasn't afraid. I think it just wanted to get a good look at us and to see what we were doing. Oh, and there's another thing I wanted to bring up. So, the ranger mentioned that there's a shepherd and some sheep about a mile north of where we were. And he mentioned that, hey, it could have been one of his big dogs, because I guess they have a lot of predators in the area. So he went and got himself, I think he said they were mastiffs, real big dogs that watch his sheep and scare off predators. And so he said, well, it could have been one of those. And that kind of calmed us down for a bit. Like, yeah, it could have been just a really big dog or something, And when we were leaving, because we actually went and got in the car and actually drove back up the road with the flashlights, because we were curious, kind of the fear had calmed down just enough where we kind of wanted to go back out and to see if we saw anything again, but in the car. And when we were leaving, we went up that way towards where he said the shepherd was, and we eventually found his flock that were roaming around in a field. And we saw one of the dogs, and it was way too small to have been what I saw.
Yeah, and generally too, I mean, a dog's going to come up to you. It's going to growl at you, or it's going to come up to you, one or the other. That's why they call it man's best friend. It's probably going to walk up and see what you guys are doing. It's not going to just stay there and kind of turn away. And, and 3 feet up, even a large dog like that, that's still pretty big. For it to be 3 feet up above the brush next to a tree, and the eye shine that you described, the size of the eyes, doing the OK symbol, dog's eyes aren't that big.
No, definitely. And for the longest time, I really tried to convince myself it was a bear, but not too long ago, I was going back and listening to some of your shows, and I listened to the episode where the gentleman's talking about how he went camping with his 2 sons, and they had 2 of them circling his camp. Oh. And at the end of that, he mentions how his son saw eyeshine in about 20 feet away from them while they were packing up their car. And the way he described that was exactly kind of what I went through. And that's what really made me start questioning if it really was a bear or not.
Yeah, I don't think it was a bear. Just the way you described its behavior, that's not bear behavior. It's just not.
Yeah.
Especially if a bear, like I said, if a bear comes in that close, you're in for a lot of hurt. And I just don't see it being a bear, but would have been nice to get a look at the thing, huh?
Oh yeah, we didn't. We regret it because we really didn't have very strong flashlights. But after that, we found some really powerful flashlights, and we've been wanting to go and use them because I'm sure if we had more powerful flashlights, we may have seen the face. But just the flashlight I had at the time and my brother, it was only enough to get the eyes to glow, nothing else.
Yeah. Well, be careful if you go back up there. And Trent, tell me about when you and your dad went out to the Skinwalker Ranch. I'm curious to know what you guys ran into.
So my father's really into the subject of aliens and paranormal things more than I am. I was always a bit more skeptical of that than anything, but and I had no idea what the ranch was, but he just took me and my stepmom and my brother out one night. Actually, no, it wasn't my stepmother, it was my sister-in-law. So we were out there again, and on our way up, he played us a video kind of talking about what went on up there. And I was like, wow, okay, so we're actually going to this crazy haunted paranormal place. Cool. And it's probably about 2.5 to 3 hours out from where I live. It's down southeast in Utah near Nephi. So it's pretty out there. And we got there, and it was already dark when we rolled into town. And we had no idea where we were going. The directions my father had were really vague. And it's on an Indian reservation. And so we went into a gas station, and the Native American clerk was there. And my father just casually went up to him. He's like, hey, how do you find the Skinwalker Ranch? And the guy's like, you're really going to go out there? I'm like, yeah. He's like, well, seriously, dude, don't. That place is bad news. Do not go out there. And we're like, and he's like, well, can you at least just tell me where to go? Because I'm going. And so we packed up and we drove out there. It's about a 30-minute drive out from town. I forget what town it's called. I have to look that up. But so we get out there, and there's a nice big tall hill probably south of the property. It's about half a mile away from the property that you can get up on. And so we parked up on the hill, and we're sitting there, and you get a really nice look at the property. There was no moon that night, so it was really dark and really clear. And, we're sitting there watching the property for a minute, and some coyotes started howling pretty close to us. They were very close, and my brother and my dad wanted to get a good look at them. So they decided to pull on their phones and start playing wounded rabbit noises. And I was like, what are you doing? And they're like, oh, we just want to get a good look at them. I'm like, whatever, and I was kind of getting scared because I think they're crazy. But the coyotes kept howling, and there was about 2 of them, and they weren't necessarily circling us, but there was one on one side and one on the other, and they were howling and yipping and whatnot at us. And they finally left, and we were like, well, that was pretty cool. And so we're watching the property again for a minute, and this weird blue fog started emanating from the field in between us and the house. And there's no moon. There's nothing like really illuminating it. But you can tell there's a blue fog or a mist kind of rolling around on the property. And we're thinking, what is that, And the fog was kind of getting up towards us, and we were kind of in it, but not really. But it pretty much obscured the property for a good 20 minutes. And we had no idea what that was about. And before we got up in the car to drive away, we noticed there was a fighter jet flying over the property, but he was really high up, like almost stratosphere level high up. But we could tell it was a fighter jet because you can barely hear him and you could see the lights. And, we live up kind of by Hill Air Force Base, but that's a couple hours away. We're like, what's a fighter jet doing out here? And he was making a pass up above. And when we were driving away from the property, we all saw the best way to describe it was a carousel in the sky. You ever see like a merry-go-round? It's circular and it's got the lights going and everything. We saw that pretty much going off in the sky. And we almost like wrecked. We had to stop and we're like, what is that? And it was going, and then it was just kind of gone. We couldn't see it anymore, and we're like, whoa. And that really freaked us out. And then my dad wanted to do one more thing before we left. I mean, we were already like, wow, we're having such good luck. Let's go do something else around here. So what he wanted to do was try to drive up to the front gate of the property and see if we can get a good look at the house or whatnot. So we find the road that leads to the property, and we're driving out on there. And it's a good mile drive on that road to get to there. It's pretty far back out there. And while we're going, we noticed there's a bunch of neighbors around the property that all have these really nice sports cars and whatnot. And we're just kind of thinking like, what are all these cars doing out here? These really nice, sports cars, BMWs, whatever. What are they doing out here? And everyone had their lights on, and like everyone was awake. And this is like 2 a.m. So we're like, what's everyone doing awake and whatnot? And I think they were watching us. And when we got up near the fence line, there was a big concrete barrier with reflective tape on it. And we're kind of getting closer, and we could see the reflection of the tape. And about the time that we could see the barricades and whatnot, a big light goes off, and it's a spotlight. And we hear security guards yelling and screaming, and we hear dogs. So we're quickly trying to peel out of there, but it's a really tight road, so we had to make like a 30-point turn. And during that, you know, we can hear everyone like running at us and like dogs starting to come out. And we were driving away as fast as we could, and the light stayed on for a while. We went back about 40 minutes later, and the light was still on. And we pretty much had to call it a night there because we were just so burnt out from everything that we were seeing out there at the property. We just couldn't believe it.
Where did the spotlight come from? What did it come from? The house?
It wasn't necessarily from the house. So, and we went back there during the day one time. We've been out there a few times. And so what they have is they have a concrete barrier and then the gate behind it. And on top of the gate, they have a big spotlight that's either motion triggered or there's always a guard there, because the property was purchased by a multi-billionaire who's really into like space exploration and whatnot. So I'm pretty sure he has pretty tight security out there because, you know, the place kind of has a legend out here and stop people from trying to break into the property. But pretty much when we were probably 50 feet away from the gate is when the light turned on. And it was really bright. And it scared the living crap out of us.
Yeah, I can imagine.
You can find videos on YouTube of the front gate and the light. People have videos of it.
How far from you was the blue fog you're describing?
So if from where we were sitting, you're kind of on top of a hill. It drops down, and there's a pretty hefty field in between you and the property. The property is pretty far out, and there's a little river with some trees that runs out, probably in between you and the property, and that's where their fence line is. And all throughout the field and on the property was the blue fog, and it kind of started creeping up the hill, but it never really got up the hill to where we were. But it was all over the property, and it just came out of nowhere.
That would get me. That'd be enough for me right there. I'd be like, we're out of here. You know,
we weren't necessarily scared, but we were just like, you know, what's going on? This is really weird.
No, I get it.
What really, I mean, I thought I was just really tired when I saw the little lights in the sky, the carousel or whatever. But my father saw it, my brother saw it, and we were all like, whoa, what? And so I don't think, you know, I was tired and seeing things. I mean, we all saw it.
Yeah, no, I've never been out there. I've heard about that place. And, you know, a lot of times the Native Americans, and I can say this because my grandmother was full Apache, but, you know, a lot of times they're the most superstitious people you ever meet in your life. But usually when they tell you don't go somewhere, usually there's a reason behind it. You know, usually.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
You know, so I'd be careful out there, man. I'd be real careful out there.
Oh, here's something I forgot. So after the coyotes and everything, and before we saw the carousel, we were driving around on the dirt roads that were going around the property. And there's a few residential houses out there, but they're really, you know, scarce and far between. And we're driving around, and we notice two house dogs, like a beagle or something, and another like house dog, and a coyote, all walking together like they're best friends. Like the coyote's in the middle, and there's two house dogs just walking around with it. And that was the strangest thing I think I saw the whole night, just because it was so out of the ordinary. You know, like two house dogs, they had collars on, and they're just walking around with a coyote.
Yeah, that
goes along with the whole skinwalker thing, because, you know, they've, in the legend, skinwalkers, you know, turn into animals and whatnot. So that kind of fit in with the whole legend of the place.
Well, the crazy thing with Native Americans, the moment you bring up, and maybe it's just me, maybe they don't want to talk to me, but the moment you bring up skinwalkers, I would say 99.9% of the time, Native Americans shut down and don't want to talk about it. They want nothing to do with the subject. And it's almost like pulling teeth to get them to, I've done it with Brenda Harris. I've done it with other natives and really tried to pin them down on skinwalkers. And, you know, it's like, next question. They don't even want to address it. They just want to move on. And it, you know, so it makes you wonder what is it about that subject, if it's demonic or what's going on there, that they don't want to talk about it. Because you bring up bring up Bigfoot or Dogman, and you know, they'll tell you everything they, you know, or little people, they'll sit and tell you all day long what they know about it. But the moment you bring up the skinwalkers, they want nothing to do with it.
You could tell the court knew full well about the location at the gas station. You know, you could tell when we brought it up to him that he did not, you know, he didn't want to talk about it. You know, when my father brought up, you know, we need locations to get out there, and he gave him a real serious look. He's like, well, you're not going out there, are you? And he's like, yeah, well, we want to go out and see what it's all about. And he's like, well, I can give you directions, but you really shouldn't go out there. You know, it's bad news. You don't want to be out there. I'm like, oh, well, you know, it's not as scary as it, you know, to us as it probably is for you. So, you know, but he gave us the directions, but, you know, you could tell he was not wanting us to go out there.
Yeah. No, and I can understand why. Well, I appreciate you coming on, Trent, and sharing the Sasquatch encounter, the potential Sasquatch encounter, and then the Skinwalker Ranch stuff that went on out there. Thank you again.
You bet.
And that's it for tonight, everyone. Remember, if you've had an encounter, shoot me an email. My email address is wes@sasquatchchronicles.com. Until next time, everyone.
Baby, you should know that you're gone. The lights on.